a bad thing. Prisoner 819 did a bad thing. Prisoner 819 did a bad thing.
In 1971, a psychologist at Stanford University named Philip Zimbardo, who was researching how being a prisoner or a prison guard would affect subjects, decided to conduct the Stanford Prison Experiment, which many of you have heard about. Its aim was to measure the effect of role-playing, labeling, and social expectations on behavior over a 2-week period. Before the experiment began, it was announced that such an experiment would be conducted at the university and that male students who wanted to volunteer could participate by filling out an application form. Following this announcement, 75 people applied. The experimenters selected 24 of these applicants, who they judged to be both physically and mentally healthier. Although the volunteers knew what kind of experiment they were going to participate in, they did not know how the experiment would start and what roles they would take on. To make the experiment more realistic, Zimbardo randomized the roles by flipping a coin without the participants' knowledge. Initially, everything was going according to plan, but the experiment would end before it had lasted even 2 weeks. So what happened to make the Stanford Prison Experiment one of the most controversial psychological experiments ever conducted, and one with the most interesting results? What happened that these 24 people, knowing that this was an experiment, brought the situation to such unbelievable heights that the authorities had to terminate the experiment as soon as possible? Before I tell you the whole story and interesting details, I would like to remind you that I spend days on each video, and all I ask from you is to subscribe and like the channel. Seeing your interest in the channel will motivate me even more. On August 14th, on a quiet Sunday morning, students posing as prisoners were suddenly taken from their homes by police officers, arrested, and taken to jail. The arrests were made by the Palo Alto police in collusion with Zimbardo, and the students were charged with armed robbery. All these events unfolded in a realistic way while the people around were watching. When the students in the role of prisoners arrived at the police station, they went through all the procedures as they should. They were read their rights, had their belongings confiscated, and were blindfolded. The reason for its realism was Zimbardo's aim to maximize the validity of the experiment and not overlook anything. The prisoners were then transported by real prisoner transport to a mock prison built in the basement of Stanford University's psychology department. Their hair was shaved to 0. They were given a number, and their feet were shackled. The subjects acting as guards were made to look like real guards. They carried wooden sticks and batons, and their uniforms were realistic. Wearing glasses to avoid eye contact with inmates, they addressed prisoners by number, not name, creating a completely authentic prison environment. The prisoners had to listen to all the orders of the guards during the experiment. The guards, on the other hand, were told that they were free to be harsh with the inmates in order to get their way, but not to use violence in any way. Zimbardo, who took on the role of prison warden, said the following while training the guards: "You can create a sense of boredom in the inmates. You can create a degree of fear, and you can make them feel that their lives are completely controlled by random forces, by the system, by you and us, and they will have absolutely no privacy. We will take away their individuality in various ways. Usually as a result of that, they feel powerless. We expect that. So as a result, we will have all the power and they will have no power." The prison cells were very narrow and each cell housed 3 prisoners. Only a garden was prepared for them. The guards worked 8-hour shifts in groups of 3 in a cozy environment. They were not required to stay in the prison after duty. At 2 a.m. on the first night, the prisoners were suddenly roused from their sleep and lined up for a head count. Such sudden counts took place at intervals throughout the day, but because the experiment had only just begun, the prisoners didn't take the guards seriously, and the guards were constantly thinking about how to get the upper hand. So any prisoner who didn't take the guards seriously during the count was punished with push-ups. Push-ups may not sound like a difficult punishment, but they were often practiced by the Nazis in the past. Some guards even put one foot on the back of the prisoner, doing push-ups to make it harder and to show off their superiority. You knew that you were not serving time for real crimes, that your fellow students were acting as fake guards as an experiment on you, and for those 14 days, your inner voice was saying, "It's just an experiment. What could be too serious?" Moreover, $15 a day was a good amount of money in those days. In today's value, that's more than $100. But despite all this, things started to get complicated on the second day. A group of prisoners in the cell blocked the door with mattresses, took off their clothes, and refused orders, saying they would not listen to the guards. Not only that, they began to shout insulting epithets at them. The guards did not expect such a riot and immediately called a meeting. Then, deciding to respond more harshly, they stormed all the cells with fire extinguishers and inflicted the first violence. They locked the prisoner who had started the riot in a dark cell and threatened the others with harsher punishments if they rioted again. However, realizing that such riots could not be solved by violence, the guards talked among themselves about the need to find a psychological solution, and they implemented a method entirely of their own devising. First, they opened a privileged special cell. The 3 prisoners who had not participated in the riot were taken into this special cell and given back their clothes and bedding. To make their situation even more special, they were allowed to take baths and ate very good food in front of the other prisoners. Immediately afterwards, they put 2 of these good prisoners back in the bad cells and put 2 of the prisoners they considered bad prisoners in special cells and gave them the same privileges. This created a lot of confusion among the prisoners, and the idea that the prisoners who had been in the bad cell and then were moved to the privileged cell might be spies, might be carrying word. Later, when they asked a counselor who used to be a prisoner, they learned that this tactic was used almost identically in real prisons. It was when the students started practicing these tactics without any idea that things really started to go wrong. In the aftermath of the riot, a different kind of cooperation began to emerge among the guards. It was no longer a simple experiment, it became a power struggle. The guards began to see the prisoners as troublemakers and decided to increase their pressure. Every single behavior of the prisoners was now under the strict control of the guards. They were even allowed to go to the toilet if the guards felt like it. As you can see, in just a few days, ordinary and normal college students turned into brutal, sadistic guards and increasingly cowardly prisoners. Each day they became more and more attached to their roles. As time went on, the guards began to use more violent psychological control tactics to maximize their control over the prisoners. Imagine, these people were the most psychologically stable out of 70 people. In just 36 hours, inmate 8612 began to exhibit what Zimbardo described as crazy behavior. Prisoner 8612 was acting like a lunatic, shouting, screaming, swearing, and throwing uncontrollable tantrums. It took us a while to accept that he was indeed in this psychological state, and we finally decided to release him. The next day, the administration thought that parents would be worried about the situation and decided to organize a meeting between parents and students. But everyone was so immersed in their roles that even the parents were admitted to the mock prison where the experiment was taking place, subjected to body searches and a great deal of scrutiny. When some of the parents who met with their children complained to Zimbardo about their children's condition, Zimbardo would ask, "Is your son so weak that he can't take it?" to persuade the fathers and prevent serious complaints. On the 4th day, a final revolt came from prisoner 416, when the former inmates told the student who joined the experiment later, "There is no way out of here." He suddenly lost his temper and went on a hunger strike. He said he would not eat unless they let him go. No matter how hard the guards tried, this prisoner was given solitary confinement. They extended the solitary confinement to 3 hours, which they had agreed among themselves as a maximum of 1 hour. This prisoner, who wouldn't eat no matter what, was eventually released from solitary confinement, and when he was released, he was found to have serious medical problems. By the 5th day, things were seriously out of control, and the experiment, which was supposed to last 2 weeks, was terminated after some families hired lawyers. Interestingly, while all the prisoners were very happy that it was over, almost all the guards were sad that it had ended prematurely, because the students who played the role of guards liked the superiority they had over the prisoners, the way they manipulated them, and some of them were even abused. These students, participants in an experiment, were so caught up in their assigned roles, even though they could communicate as guards and prisoners as they wished, that they were treated inhumanely. Even Zimbardo, who designed the experiment, would allow this degrading behavior for a while. As he himself said, "Only a few people were able to maintain morality in the face of power, and I was certainly not one of those strong individuals." The Stanford Prison Experiment showed how powerful an influence roles have on human behavior. Because the guards had the powerful position, they started to do things they would never normally do. The prisoners began to behave exactly as a prisoner would behave, passive and depressed. This turn of events has provoked much criticism and debate since then and to this day. Notably, in 2019, after 48 years, Philip Zimbardo decided to make the original records and documents from the experiment publicly available. In the same year, Letexier published an article entitled "Refuting the Stanford Prison Experiment." One of the criticisms in this article was that the participants were given instructions on how to play their roles, which disrupted the natural course of the experiment. Another serious criticism was that the experiment was not conducted in an academic setting, but as a documentary to be broadcast on the BBC, and that this may have directly influenced the behavior of the subjects. Although there were many such criticisms in general, the Stanford Prison Experiment became one of the most famous of psychological experiments, showing that people can do things they say they would never do when given certain powers, how a role can affect people, and how they can automatically make decisions as if they were the owners of that job. Thanks to this experiment, we remember this again. People are very quickly influenced by their environment and surroundings and start to behave accordingly. The transformation of a good and successful university student into a brutal guard is a prime example of this. So never assign negative roles or say negative things to yourself or someone else. For example, don't say, "You can never do this, this is not for you," or "I can't do this for the rest of my life," because everything you say increases the likelihood that you will indeed fail, and you get caught up in that reality.